Hello and welcome to the Digital Leaders Show. We're live the first and third Wednesday of every month at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, talking key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology, focused on automation, AI, and digital transformation in hopes of making you a better digital leader. This week, we're discussing information governance in a post-chat GPT world, plus other headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up the Institute for RPA and AI and the Digital Enterprise Institute. We are a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network, providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members worldwide, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. My co-host is Chris Cerdak, former White House Chief Transformation Officer, Automation and AI Practice Lead at EY, and Executive Partner for Digital Transformation at Gartner. Chris, good to have you, buddy.
Hey, how are you?
Happy holidays. We're in the home stretch here. 2023's coming close to an end.
Where'd who go? Can you believe it's almost 2024?
I know. I say it every year, and I prepare myself for it, and it still kind of creeps up on me. But I guess that's the reality of things, especially in a post-chat GPT world.
We're past the 1 year anniversary, I believe, of the formal release of ChatGPT. So plenty to talk about in that 1 year that we've been playing with this monster.
Yeah, lots going on. I mean, I was trying to think about, specific to our topic for today, some of the headlines that, kind of piqued my interest. But, it seems to me there's a little bit of a perfect storm brewing, Chris. There's a lot of challenges out there as it relates to misinformation in general related to this. There's this guy, Gary Marcus. He's a renowned AI expert and author, waving the caution flag this week, saying there's like 60 or 70 elections next year across the globe that, he's concerned about last minute deep fakes and Gen AI having some kind of effect on. I saw another stat that said AI generated content may be accountable, may be responsible for 99% of all information on the internet in the next couple of years. All while tech companies like Meta, Amazon, Alphabet, X have all scaled back their safety and security teams as part of the recent layoffs. One more stat from Pew says the share of teenagers who say they're online almost all the time has doubled to 46% in the last 8 years. So, that's, like I say, brewing for a perfect storm of challenges.
Well, and I think the other 54% that didn't acknowledge they were online were too busy like surfing TikTok to answer the question. So
yeah, exactly, right. And and Meta's also facing all those lawsuits, right? That they knowingly harmed young or underage users. So, the question is, will the regulation side of things be able to keep up?
Well, and that's always the challenge. And I've been in and around the legal and regulatory world for the better part of 25 years, and the unfortunate reality of most regulation is that it is almost always an overcorrection for a horrible event taking place, right? So something kind of builds up, and then this really terrible event takes place, and then we will implement a new rule, a new law, a new regulation, whatever, to make sure that horrible thing never happens again. And it's almost always an overcorrection. So I think we're likely to see a degree of that in the coming year to 2 years, because there are more of the sort of negative, inevitable costs of using this technology type stuff happening. And there's that old saying, once you turn the Titanic with a teaspoon, once it starts turning, it's not going to turn back very easily. So I think we're kind of in the Titanic's starting to turn a phase of adoption of this stuff.
Yeah, listen, on the other hand, you could argue it's the amount of kind of balance, or at least attempted balance, is happening at a very quick pace. I mean, the EU looks like they're passing that AI Act that we've talked about, which happened pretty quickly, relatively, right? Supposedly, it was after 37 hours of negotiation last week, but they're putting this act in place, which includes a lot of transparency requirements, limitations on facial recognition and biometric scanning, things like that. The Biden administration's also had this executive order, although it's mostly focused on government agencies. And I think it's mostly voluntary protections for the commercial world. New York is putting $1 billion into chip facilities. The U.S. government's doing similar things to kind of push off the reliance on Chinese-made chips. And Apple claims to be ramping up their iPhone security. So there's stuff happening on that side of it as well, right? But the challenge still becomes, like you say, who's always winning in that race. It almost reminds me of the cybersecurity, arms race from a few years ago, which is still going on.
Very much so. Well, and as you mentioned, deep fakes and so forth being used in cybersecurity. Personally, I've had multiple spear phishing attacks over the course of the last couple of weeks through my text messages with one of my colleagues, and it's very, very very persuasive. It's very well done. So I think you're going to see that sort of the technology. Every technology has no morality. It's what you do with it that makes it moral or not. So as much as we're going to see a lot of benefits from Gen AI, we're going to see a lot of the negative stuff, and I think that's we're just starting to see the tip of that at this point.
I saw one of the best ones I've ever seen. I pride myself in being a technologist and being up to speed on these types of things, especially AI, running a automation and AI association. But I got one actually this week, and then also about a week and a half ago in my email, where it sent me an email from a person who we use as a vendor asking to update the payment information before their next bill. So somehow this thing, it either really did a good job of guessing or somehow pulled together a profile of me. It had the name of the person that we pay. It had some text in there about payment by a certain date. And if I didn't catch the fact that, the funny thing was the way it was written didn't seem like the person who I know wrote it. That's because I know that person very well. If I didn't know that person that well, it might have got me. It's pretty good, using all this correlation technology.
I have a background in cybersecurity. I've done it for a long time, and this attack almost got me. And oh, by the way, by going that far with attacking me on this, and then me figuring it out, I just trained it how to be even better the next time around. That's one of the challenges of this technology with generative AI. The more you interact with it, the better it's going to be at being bad. We're kind of optimally training it to be as deceptive as possible.
So, it's a good segue to our topic today. I just got off a webinar actually around, customer experience. And so one of the things we were talking about is, the benefits of kind of enterprise grade AI, working on, customer data with compliance and regulatory guardrails and things like that versus having to figure out the black box thing or having ChatGPT kind of hallucinate. But I want to kind of dive into this information governance issue. And our guest today is Robert Smallwood. He's an information governance SME and consultant, keynote speaker and author. He's the CEO of AIIM World Magazine and the chairman of Certified Information Governance Officers. Robert, good to have you on the show.
Good to be here. Thanks a lot. Good to see you guys.
So I'll start it off, and then I know Chris has some better questions for you than I. But you've been on BBC, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. I'm curious as to is there one kind of common theme of common denominator as far as what people are asking you these days?
Well, I'd say information governance has started to come of age, and it's less mysterious than it was, say, 5 years ago when there weren't a lot of examples. And we've got whole teams, companies, enterprises that are engaging in information governance programs, which really the core of it requires cross-functional collaboration. So you really need to have your team looking at information from different perspectives, and those include those that are listed in, for instance, the IG reference model. So IT needs to have a say because we're talking about technology. Legal needs to be involved because of regulatory requirements and retention requirements and disposition, and privacy and security need to be involved. You have to have security before privacy. So we have to keep an eye on privacy regulations. And also, just from a risk management standpoint, IG is really an information risk management sort of a discipline. And that was underscored by the passage of the ISO 24143 standard last May, a year ago. And that emphasizes through and through that document risk assessment, risk mitigation, and that's really the focus. So I think we did an event in Chicago this past May and on information risk, and it's something that really a lot more companies are starting to figure out that it's important to get a handle on information risk, and you have to go at it from this cross-functional approach.
Chris, over to you, buddy.
Yeah, well, it's thinking back to the conference we had just a couple of months ago, and one of the comments that I always make around information governance is I compare it to toilet paper in a public toilet, right? Nobody wants to pay for it, but it better be there when I need it. Are you finding more interest and more willingness to invest in information governance? Because I think historically it's always been viewed as a necessary evil almost, or a cost center.
Yeah, well, there's more of a move toward these new cyber standards that are being imposed by the federal government and really by financial and insurance organizations. Like, if you're going to do business with us, you've got to have your cyber act together. And cybersecurity is great from the standpoint, traditionally it's trying to keep the bad guys out. It's trying to protect the perimeter and have multiple layers of defense in depth to keep them away from those crown jewels. And information governance really approaches cybersecurity more from the inside out. So we do an inventory of your information assets, determine those that are the most valuable, then apply the greatest protections, spend the most amount of money, allocate the most budget to protecting those crown jewels. So even if and when the bad guys get in, they don't get to the crown jewels. So it's more of an inside out kind of approach. It's a more complete approach really to information security. So I think more of a willingness there to do it.
And so that's a phenomenal segue into part of the heart of the conversation we wanted to have, which is with generative AI. I mean, companies that are implementing these platforms and putting all their corporate data into it, so forth. It reminds me of the whole thing with vampires. Like, if you invite them into your house, they're free to kill you. To a certain extent, I kind of wonder if that's what we're doing with generative AI and people very willingly putting all their corporate data into these platforms. I mean, is that something that you're seeing more and more people are concerned with?
Yeah, well, people are trying to get a handle on what's termed now AI governance. And, there's some training programs that have popped up from a couple of different associations. And we're actually rolling one out in right now. The first class will be in February. And a certified information governance officer /AI from our Certified Information Governance Officers Association. So what we're doing really is to be able to, a lot of people think, well, AI, oh gosh, it's so different. How do we handle this monster? All these, these arms and legs. Well, we can start by using a foundation of information governance principles and best practices, because AI is really just another software application. And so the way that we manage other information, we have to apply those general principles. And that means a cross-functional approach to it. And it means using some of those tried and true proven best practices, leveraging the information governance reference model, even to a lesser degree, e-discovery reference model. And that gives it a framework, a foundation for approaching it. And if you don't have all of those pieces, all of those facets of information governance covered in your AI governance, including records management. This is something that's missing in a lot of the other training programs is, hey, we're going to have to manage this data as records, and it could be called into court. So we have to have e-discovery, preservation procedures in place. And so it's really just another application. Now, there are differences, certainly, because in other applications, if you're implementing a new accounting system or ERP, you don't have to worry about things that you have to worry about in AI, like training bias or explainability and transparency, like how did you develop this model, the paradata behind it, and really the ethical use of AI, ethical considerations there. A simple example is, do you train the car if it's going to hit someone and it has to hit one person or the other? Do you train it to hit the old man, or do you train it to hit the child? So do you save senior citizens or do you save children? You got to make those ethical choices, and there's all kinds of those kinds of ethical choices that you don't have in a normal, implementation of a CRM or accounting system. So there are differences there, but we can use some foundational precepts and best practices out of the information governance discipline.
Yeah, I think the ethical question sorts of things, and then you kind of come up, can we even ask those questions? Well, the challenge is you're going to have to, because if you don't, then they're going to present themselves in ways that you probably don't want to have to deal with.
Yeah, and so you have to ask those hard questions. I know some people in our group, we have a monthly meet and greet of certified information governance officers, and some people, they formed a separate subgroup, a task force, really to just research AI and the ethical standpoint, ethical aspects of it. And this is happening in the real world. These are people at large insurance companies and banks and law firms that are having to wrestle with AI creeping around the corner and employees using it, whether it's sanctioned or not. And so they have to start to put some guardrails on it, because it can pretty quickly get out of control. Because as you say, Chris, it can actually get dumber as it continues to slurp up information from social media, and it can get more and more off base, really. But what we're seeing is companies training these models for specific applications and using them within their company to reduce costs and increase accuracy, and even things like financial planning that's going to get picking stocks and so forth. I mean, now this thing can go out and look at thousands of stocks and take all those different parameters you're looking for and prioritize those, and that's something that a financial planner might have spent hours or days doing.
I'm now part of a team that is actually using AI to disrupt that very thing, and I will tell you that the impact that this has on something like financial services is extraordinary. So I mean, the level of disruption that's going to come from that, I think very few of us are prepared for.
Yeah,
Robert, let me ask you the impossible question Chris and I were debating before you joined, which is, and specific to information governance for you, are the benefits of this Gen AI stuff outpacing the negatives to information governance, or vice versa?
Well, I think the benefits are there to be had, but we have to have these guardrails in place, and more and more the emphasis. We say information governance is about minimizing information risks and costs while maximizing information value, and the value side of it has gotten more and more attention in the last few years. And instead of just being this compliance thing, this drudgery, we have to do this thing. It's there's some good data here. There's some data we might be able to leverage into new products and new services, improve customer service. Where's the value? Let's look for the value side of things. And, there's all kinds of examples of that. There's a company that gathered up all of the credit card transactions from 1,000 different banks, anonymized them. And this was just data that was sitting there, anonymized it to synthesize some of the data, and then bundle it up and sold it to, and they sell it to, Wall Streeters, investment bankers, hedge funds that want to know who's buying shoes in what zip code, or umbrellas in what zip code, or some of those trends that they can get a handle on. But that data was just sitting there at the banks. It was just stagnant, archived, and this way this company actually does a revenue share back with the bank, so they're actually monetizing some of that data that was just sitting there. So they're looking for opportunities like that. Is kind of the newer trend, a newer part of information governance.
Yeah, I think too, it's a great point, and to also the extent of, maybe AI plus information governance allows you to train and learn, and control is the wrong word, but enable employees who are interfacing with customers to be saying the right thing, the best thing, right, in a much more real time way. No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's going to get. I mean, there's all these studies, all these polls now. People are 70, 80, 90% of people in white collar jobs think that AI could do most of their job. So then what are they going to end up doing? Because a lot of what we spend, a lot of what white collar workers spend their time on is just searching for information and pulling that information together and then trying to do some analysis on it. Whereas AI can do that, in a blink of an eye, and it can get better and better at it. So a lot of these compliance jobs are going to be less and less of that kind of legwork and more of the strategic work, I think.
Yeah, would you agree that we're in the situation where the at the moment that we realize that the AI can't do something, it's probably going to be some kind of disaster that we're then going to have to intervene. The more that we're depending upon it, sort of the worse the situation is going to be when it turns out to be not dependable.
Yeah, like you come home and your heater is on 100 degrees and the lights are flashing and the garage door is opening and closing, and I mean, the more you get I see people using just automation depending on it too much, like sitting there looking at a GPS and not looking at the road signs and literally driving off a cliff or into a lake or something. And you still have to have that some common sense, that human factor, that grounding in there to be able to get the most out of AI, I think.
I've literally experienced that, having an Uber driver that was just going around and around and around in circles because that's what the app was telling him to do. I mean, I eventually had to tap him on the shoulder and say, "Hey, can you just turn to the left up here?"
Yeah, just read the road signs.
Yeah.
I had that happen to me at the airport. Just kept going around and around. I ended up in the freight area, and I'm like, "The airport's over there. We can see it.
See all those planes? Yeah.
Look up."
Yeah. I don't care what the app says. It's right over there. Let's follow the signs." So,
Well, I also find, so when I was doing certification on how governments can regulate AI, and about half a day of the classes I dedicated to teaching, in this case, ministers, how to lie with data, statistics, analytics, and so forth. And one of them was asking me, like, well, why would you train us how to lie with this stuff? And I said, so you would have some idea of when it's being done to you. And unfortunately, there's tremendous numbers of examples out there of that sort of thing. You're using statistics to manipulate the message and so forth. And I think we're going to see that even more so occur with these sorts of technologies. I mean, you want to expand on that at all, or?
Yeah, like liars figure and figures lie kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could make a case for either way, and when you're looking at data. So that's why it's important to train AI, and we've got problems with that because it's kind of a rote task. And I forget where I think it's Finland is doing training of a AI model that's in Finnish, and they're like, well, we have to have some that's not in English. We have to have our own model, but they're paying prisoners to train the AI model. And they're paying them by the hour.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, they're not paying them by how accurate or good a job they're doing. They're paying them by the hour. Now, I can't think of a more disaffected population that might have something, an axe to grind than prisoners. And it's not much better in other parts of the world. They're using, low-paid workers in third world countries to train AI. So, it's really going to depend, on how it's trained. And the idea behind it is if you're using it for mortgage banking, you get the ideas of the best, say the 50 best mortgage bankers, and you get all that in there. If you use it for healthcare, you get the 50 best doctors on a particular specialty, get their opinions and interpretations in there. And so we've got that combination of the best and brightest built in. But that's not the way it's being done in a lot of cases now. It's being done by low-level, poorly paid people and even prisoners.
Well, and that, to me, that's one of the challenges of large language models and just opening it up to the whole world, right? And letting the technology sort of go feral. I can ask Chat GPT something about like medicine, as you just said, and it might have the opinions of the 50 best doctors out there, but it also has a whole bunch of opinions on, the Kardashians. And that data does not help. In fact, it's only going to pollute the results that I'm going to get from the 50 smart people, right?
Or the medical insights of the Kardashians.
Get a BBL, you'll be fine. No, we're trying to talk about cancer here.
Yeah. So it really depends on, it's garbage in, garbage out. It depends on what gets trained, how it gets trained.
And my gosh, if you understand the mathematics, that to me is the most important thing here. This technology is nothing but an amplifier. And so if you're feeding it garbage, you're going to get refined garbage. It's going to be garbage plus. And I think there's a lot of people that are finding that as the result.
Yeah, so that it really emphasizes the need early on for good data governance practices so that you've got good, clean, non-redundant data that goes into these models, and you track that and you verify that, and that's really the foundation of good information governance programs, trying to get good, trusted, accurate data and information as close to the source as possible so that all the downstream calculations, analytics, and reports are more accurate and reliable.
So it's interesting, Robert, you say that. So, we joked on the show a couple of weeks ago about, I come from the automation space and the outsourcing space. Outsourcing used to be, your mess for less. And now automation's kind of your mess at scale, right? Now you add AI to it and it just accelerates at an insane pace. What's your advice from a data governance perspective? If someone watching here is responsible for data governance and they're trying to deal with the pros and cons of all this AI stuff, what's your advice? What are some of the best practices around data governance in this area?
Well, you certainly want to, like Bob Signer says, is you're doing data governance in your organization, whether you realize it or not. But can we formalize those behaviors? And that's his approach in this book called Non-Invasive Data Governance. And really, the idea is to have data stewards or data trustees, we can call them, in the business units themselves, who understand the context of the data, the value of the data, and they're charged with making sure they get good, clean, reliable data as close to the point of entry as possible, and they understand the value of it in their context. Whereas if you try to push data governance over to the IT side, they might do a good job of data cleansing, data scrubbing, getting rid of adulterated data and so forth, but they're not really going to understand that one data set or report might be valuable to one department and not to another. And so you need a business analyst type of a person at the departmental level to coordinate that in terms of training and awareness to the people in that unit in terms of the value of information and the value of accurate information, and trying to get good, clean, non-redundant data there as close to the point of entry as possible.
Robert, what you're saying is so critically important, and I think people miss this. The context of the information is absolutely critical, and all the other things. Nearly all of our governance approaches and management and tools and techniques and so forth come from how we manage capital, money, right? So all the processes come from capital management. And one of the things that's true of money is it's fungible, right? Whether I have dollars or pounds or euros or whatever, the way I control it is always the same. Information isn't like that. a piece of information might be completely useless in one context, and then in another context, it's the most valuable thing in the organization. Like I often say, you know, how valuable is knowing the price of IBM stock next week versus last week? It's a big difference. And so we have to treat it differently, and most of our tools and techniques don't reflect that context richness.
Mhm. Yeah, it's all about the context and how valuable it is. And so you're going to see departments training these AI models for specific tasks within their departments, and you're going to see some displacement for sure. You're going to see layoffs, you're going to see attrition, but you're also going to see a move to perhaps a newer types of jobs that are more strategic and less rote work.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Robert. How do you see this, affecting the people in your world, the information governance practitioners?
Oh, they're right now all just scrambling to look for, how do we put guardrails on this thing, and what are our guidelines for use, and they're kind of gotten caught off guard. And it was funny. I was talking to my son last night about AI a little bit, and I told him, AI, it's been around for 50 years or so. I told him I started reading about it in college in the psychology department in university 45 years ago. And, they didn't have the software all developed back then, but they were starting. And I remember, AI and neural computing being used, when I was at Wang Labs in the 80s. So he said, well, why is it, so crazy? Well, it's because now it's getting to the consumer. It's consumer facing. And now consumers are seeing what can be done. And it's, with the deep fakes in media, now consumers are seeing the impact of AI, but it's been used in automating processes for decades in the IT world.
Yeah, the democratization of it, right? I mean, we used to talk about the proverbial black box of AI being such a hurdle for enterprises. Now everybody kind of has access to it and can see some of the initial benefits of it. So, what's your advice, Robert? For anybody who is kind of weighing the pros and cons of this, and I'm trying to avoid asking you the crystal ball question, but if you play this out kind of a year or two, what do you think your space looks like?
Well, first of all, go to cgoa.org and look at the CGO/AI certification training so that you can get up to speed on it. Second of all, if you don't have a formal information governance program, and a lot of companies don't realize they have one because it's not named that, but they have those pieces in place. So they really need to formalize it, and you have to have a strong executive sponsor. So look for that executive sponsor that cares about it, has some skin in the game, and can help move things forward in terms of just allocating budget and time resources to be able to have a formal program. And then like any other program or project, set your business objectives. Why are we doing this? Are we just playing with AI, or what are the business objectives for that? And then you start to get some structure there. How can it help us? And you tie those business objectives to your corporate objectives so that everything you do within your AI program helps you to move toward accomplishing your business objectives. And then below those, you have metrics and milestones that you're measuring your progress as you go. So you just really need to formalize the approach to AI governance, I think.
Is that a typical challenge? And then I'll let Chris ask any of his final questions. Is that a typical scenario, Robert, in an organization where they don't have a centralized function and it's kind of hidden in other areas?
Well, yeah, information governance is a cross-functional kind of a program that involves these silos that are normally used to operating all by themselves. And, whether it was IT or legal or privacy or security, now they have to work together. The challenge is that typically the executive sponsor of an IG program isn't going to have them as direct reports. So you can't really force them to go to the meetings and do the work. But so there has to be a corporate or an organizational mandate to do that, and that really needs to come from the top. But having a strong executive sponsor is important because you don't always see the immediate benefits of an information governance program. And if you're reducing risk, then, how do you measure that? How do they know something's really happening? Well, there's some interesting software that's been developed in the last few years called quantitative risk analysis, where they actually put kind of like a credit score on your information risk. And so then executives can see, we did our security awareness training, we did privacy awareness training, we've actually reduced our risk. They can see that a little more tangibly than waiting for something to blow up and then doing, what Doug Laney calls blunder funding, throwing money at it to try to fix it.
Yeah, it's the old, stop chasing horses, start building fences.
Yeah.
And you see it over and over again. But blunder funding, that's absolutely perfect.
A good example of that is Colonial Pipeline. A few years back, that had their ransomware attack, and they killed. I was the consultant there prior to that. And I laid out a whole information governance program for them, and they decided to focus only on cybersecurity. And after the ransomware attack, they spent tens of millions of dollars trying to go back and fix things, whereas they could have done it for $1 million or $2 million and got everything squared away and straight. So, you see those examples where, and back then when I would bring up, I'd say you have too much information risk, and I put that right in the first paragraph of the executive summary. The guy leaned back, put his boots up on the desk, said, "Well, we've got cyber insurance for that." So, cyber insurance doesn't cover your CEO having to go to Capitol Hill and testify in front of Congress and then later getting fired, and your CIO getting fired, and all of your employees'
This revenue,
personal data being revealed, and your 2,000 miles of pipeline that you didn't want anybody to know about. Now everybody knows about it. I mean, you go to their office in Alpharetta, Georgia, there's no sign on it. They wanted to be under the radar. Now they're not under the radar. Cyber insurance isn't going to cover that, although there are some provisions for brand equity loss in some cyber policies, but it's not going to cover all of that.
I actually have horror stories of exactly that sort of thing, from believe it or not, the medical field, where a client of mine was producing therapeutics that kept about 30,000 people alive. And if their ERP system crashed, they would literally have to destroy a year's supply, and all their customers would literally die. And instead of building a hot backup of their ERP system, they just bought cyber insurance. I can't make stuff like that up. It's amazing. But in terms of
cyber insurance is a tool as part of your overall risk reduction and mitigation strategy, but you can't rely on it completely. You still got to clean your own house.
That's the thing about insurance. You hope you never need it, right? If you need it, then something went horribly wrong. And I think that's probably even more true in the information field.
Mm-hmm.
So, Robert, anyone interested in this stuff? What sort of resources do you have available to them? Advice, guidance, etc.
Well, I've got a 505-page book I wrote on information governance. That's kind of a textbook kind of approach, and we've got training classes for certified information governance officer, and then also the new AI one. And you got to do your own research too. So doing things like look up the NIST risk management framework for AI. Start reading that stuff. That's what federal government's starting to push out there, and it changes almost every day. The EU AI Act just came out in the last week or two, and it's going to be like this. There's these technology waves that come. They say like every 18 months. There's these technology waves, but this one's going to be around for a long time. So really, everyone needs to get their arms around it and get up to speed.
Robert, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the year, and Happy New Year, Happy Holidays.
Appreciate it. You too. You as well. Happy holidays. Have a safe, happy, and prosperous New Year.
Thank you, Robert. Sir. Thanks for being here. So, Chris, it's amazing to me as we kind of branch out into different adjacencies to what we do. You hear the same story over and over again. I mean, how is something so vital like information not its own function? It's like buried within. Nobody owns it. When Robert mentioned that these guys don't report to a lot of the executives in some of these companies. I mean, you see this with AI, although now they're starting to be chief AI officers. You see this, I just mentioned CX. I mean, these are the people that are on the front lines talking to your customers, but they're buried under an operations person a lot of the time. It's just amazing to me.
Well, I think there's a degree of sort of focus whack-a-mole that executives go through, and it's necessarily complex. So the squeaky wheel gets the funding, so to speak, and that's kind of a poor without anticipating what could potentially go wrong with these technologies and sort of being a little bit ahead of it. It's not something you want to have to keep chasing. So it's very easy to emphasize all the pluses and the benefits and the whiz bang and sort of the shiny penny aspects of the technology adoption. But in my view, success with these tools is at least as much about mitigating the negatives, which are always there, as it is embracing the positives. And I think that having sort of that more balanced and rational approach, both the yin and the yang of the technology, is a key to doing well with it.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, great session, Chris. And our next show is going to be on January 3rd. We have the global head of IBM's automation advisory business. He's going to talk about kind of recapping the year, RPA plus AI, and predictions for next year. So looking forward to that. And in the meantime, if you benefit from a free coaching session or state of the industry briefing on anything digital transformation, automation, or AI, let us know. Go to network.irpaai.com to schedule that. In the meantime, Chris, have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, Happy New Year, and I'll see you on the other side.
Sounds great. You too.
Take care, everybody. Have a good
Cheers.
holiday. Bye-bye.